Welcome to the second part of our Sustainable on the Go conference. And I would like to welcome my colleague Larissa Bezo, who's the president and CEO of the Canadian Bureau for International Education. We also have Bruno Guillaume dos Santos, who is a young leader from Brazil. And I believe Anjali Kumar is a student at York University. So I think this session is focusing on sustainable and inclusive global learning. And we have heard from the wonderful insights that we received from Dr. Bhavani Rao, as well as the introduction from our colleague from Simon Fraser University, Shaheen Nanji. And this time around, we are calling on Larissa, who is actually part of our first Sustainable on the Go conference in 2021. And the idea being, we really want to hear from her and from our students or young peoples here, Anjali and Bruno, who will be sharing their reflections on first, what has happened since 2 years ago, or shall we say a year and a half ago, and the inputs and the insights from Anjali and Bruno will be very helpful for us as we reflect on what does the future look like, right? What will be the post-pandemic picture of sustainable and inclusive global learning? And so with that, I'm gonna pass on the facilitation role to Zainab, who's also here. Welcome, Zainab. So lovely to see you. Thanks for joining.
Hello, wonderful. Thank you for having me. I'm Zainab Bokhari, and I'll be facilitating this session. So we have Larissa Bezo with us. She presently serves as President and Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Bureau for International Education. And so, Larissa, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Zainab. It's wonderful to be here with Bruno and Anjali and so many colleagues from around the globe. I was thinking about where to start and reflecting back on the conversation that we had with the conference in 2021. And I guess one of the elements that stood out for me was really, I think, important to take stock of the kinds of transitions and transformations that we have been experiencing throughout the work of international education over the course of this last, I guess, year and a half. We were at perhaps a more intense stage with the global pandemic, and certainly we've been navigating much complexity since that time. I think what stands out for me, however, is I think an increasing awareness that as we emerge from many of these challenging moments, it's really imperative for us to be putting our students at the heart of what we do. And so that means recognizing vulnerabilities that may have intensified. That means recognizing that those vulnerabilities may not merely affect academic performance, but they require us to think in a much more holistic way about students, about the journeys that they're on, about the families and communities that surround them, about the challenges that they face within those communities and those family situations that have an impact on their day-to-day lives. And that might mean financial vulnerability. That might mean challenges with health and well-being, whether that be physical or perhaps mental. And that may be navigating other fragilities. And I think it's critically important for us to consider our students in that complex way and recognize that we're really talking about, intersectional considerations. And so when we think about those elements of sustainable and inclusive learning, we need to embed flexibility within the programs that we design, and we need to create spaces that are not only safe spaces, but spaces that serve to empower. And I think it's critically important to consider that as we move forward, and to really give careful consideration to decisions that we make in framing policies and programs around the offerings and around the pathways that we create to enable that kind of sustainable and inclusive learning right around the globe, to really be cognizant of that, and to think in holistic ways. So that's one key reflection as I look back. I think the other element for me that has the potential to really accelerate a lot of what we're talking about in terms of not only granting access, but really beginning to take a much more tailored approach that puts students at the core of our offerings is to consider the role that technology has to accelerate, and the role that technology has to really help us take more customized approaches to the kinds of opportunities that we wish to provide through learning. We've seen over the course of the pandemic fundamental transformation and adoption of tech as a way of immediately continuing to give access to our students to learning. We know that road's been bumpy because of bandwidth, because of challenges in terms of access to technology. But that being said, for many years, there was resistance to adopt the technology merely because it required fundamental change across that learning ecosystem. And I think we've seen through the pandemic that it can be done. I guess the concern I have is we're also keen to return to much of the in-person learning and connection. We tend to be discarding, or perhaps setting aside, I think, the potential that we have to build on these early adoptions of technology through the pandemic experience that I would really like to see us carry forward. Certainly, there are ethical considerations and challenges that need to be considered, and we certainly recently talked about that at our CBIE conference here in Toronto. That being said, I think the transformative potential that technology offers to connect us as we talk about sustainable and inclusive learning, to connect our communities in virtual ways, to bring our youth into settings that they wouldn't necessarily ever have physical access to just by virtue of cost and other life realities that serve as barriers to that kind of mobility. I think it has the potential to be transformational. And I would certainly like to see our sector give much more consideration to how we harness that potential to promote the kinds of learning opportunities that we wish to see that would serve to empower our students and learners right around the globe. So perhaps I'll stop there, Zainab, and happy to engage with our colleagues in discussion.
Beautiful. So, whoever would like to go first, maybe I would call upon Bruno if you have any reflections on what Larissa just mentioned.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Bruno Diniz. I'm from Brazil. I'm 19 years old, and I'm from the Youth Engagement Program of the Sustainable on the Go conference. And the comments that I want to make about what Larissa just said is about to empower students, because what strongly resonates with me from what she told is that we need to empower students. We need to give like space for the students. We need to give like more space for students in places like this that we are now, for example, in this conference. We have to take what the students think in consideration while we are like taking big decisions. We have to create like spaces for them to connect, like in different places of the world, because when we talk about inclusive and sustainable internationalization, why don't we have like spaces for the students from different universities, from different countries to connect with each other? Because as Larissa just mentioned, we gained a lot of experience during the pandemic along technology. So we have like many more technology resources that we had before the pandemic. So we need to enjoy like these opportunities to create like this kind of spaces to connect students and to make them think and to empower them to think about like these great problems that the world faces right now. And I strongly believe that the students, not only the professionals, not only the doctoral students, not only the PhD students, all the students and the graduate students, high school students can have like a big impact in taking like these decisions and taking the world to a better path, so to a better way. So yes, I totally agree with Larissa. We need to achieve like these things. Anjali?
Hi everyone, my name is Anjali. I'm a student at York University. So first I want to thank Larissa for her points. Something that resonated with me most, what I say, would be the potential of technology and how can we take what we learned through COVID and implement it now in our actual lives when we're transactioning back into reality of like in person. How do we use technology and how does it, I guess, give students themselves a more accessible learning and more inclusive learning, because sometimes there are certain accessibility issues when it comes to going in person learning. So having the option of technology and having the option of virtual, it really allows them to like be able to navigate their lives better. So yeah, I really resonate with that point, and I also like the way Bruno put it, empower students. How do we work to empower students in when we're transitioning from such a difficult time into right now? So it's like, how do we do that? And I think the whole idea of how can technology be used to bring this issue of sustainable and inclusive learning, and how do we empower our students, our future students? Thank you.
Zainab, you're muted.
Yeah, I just noticed. Hey, Larissa, would you like to maybe reflect on what Bruno and Anjali said, or maybe continue with your presentation? Larissa, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Larissa?
Can you hear me now? Perfect. No, I really appreciate both Bruno and Anjali's sharing, and certainly would like to react. I agree wholeheartedly, and I think the way we move this forward, however, is I think it's important to engage students in considering how we move the use of that technology forward. So, in terms of the actual design of interventions, I don't think it's enough to say, well, we want them to be connected. To my initial point in terms of putting students at the heart of what we do broadly in international education, I think that also applies. There needs to be co-creation. Certainly our institutions and faculty and others have a sense of perhaps how they would like to harness that technology, but at the end of the day, not only the end users, but the end beneficiaries are the students themselves. And so I would really encourage us to think creatively about how we create meaningful spaces where we don't make a lot of assumptions when we come to the table, but we actually open the door almost, from the perspective of a blank canvas and engage students in helping us co-create what that looks like, whether that's a hackathon, whether that's, different spaces to be able to seek that input without any preconceived ideas about how students may benefit from, consuming and making use of that technology to really accelerate and help co-create and design the kinds of opportunities that we're talking about. I've always been surprised, and I've had the privilege of being involved in different kind of innovation spaces and in many other sectors. And I find that, when you bring thoughtful colleagues, especially those who have a vested interest in wanting to truly benefit and be empowered and have agency in a process like this, if we create the spaces and allow them to be able to define many of the terms and considerations, I've always just been in awe of what comes out of those processes, because we come in thinking one thing, but we all end up agreeing and co-creating something that's far more meaningful and far more beautiful and impactful than we could have imagined. And that's really where I'd like to encourage us to really think about putting students at the center of what we're doing, and to not lose sight as we're doing that we're really talking about complex intersectional beings whose well-being we need to nurture if we really want to benefit from the value of international education to make a difference for people and certainly for the planet.
Beautiful, thanks. I'm mindful of our time here, but Anjali or Bruno, if any one of you has a comment on that, maybe what Larissa said, the floor is open for you.
When we talk about like inclusivity and including like students in this kind of spaces, I can talk about inclusivity in a way of including low-income students, students with from low-income backgrounds. For example, I'm from a low-income family. I have no money, for example, to travel. To be in a conference in presence and so, but I'm here. I'm here participating in this conference. So I believe these technologies help us to include students in a big range of of approaches and a big range of opportunities. We can like use it to include students from regardless of their socio-economic background. And yes, I think they are very nice it's very nice that we have like these opportunities. We have to use it. Thanks.
Great. Beautiful. So I was delighted to be one of the facilitators of the SOTG Youth Engagement programs here in the conference. If you want to see how we facilitate inspiring programs, visit our booth at Crossing Borders Education. And Crossing Borders Education will also be part of the Parallel Session 3. And with that, Larissa, if you have any last comments before we're out of time, the mic is yours.
The only thing I would add is we had some time to prepare and have conversation in advance of this. And Bruno and Anjali, it was just a gift to be able to spend some time with you. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And I hope that leaving this conference, we create more and more of those spaces, to your point, Bruno. I think this is where the richness comes. The reality is that you and I probably would have never crossed paths, had it not been for this space. And technology helps to build really beautiful bridges. So thank you for sharing with me.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone. This is wonderful.
Thank you all.